Every girl's first love is their daddy, huh?
I could go deaf!
The game hasn't started yet.
We don't find you by sunrise, we'll leave.
The film opens with Evan Weber and his wife, Karen Alvarado, enjoying a moment of intimacy. However, they're interrupted by their kids, who burst in to celebrate their father's birthday. The children surprise Evan with a chocolate cake and a gift, and after a playful moment where the cake ends up smeared across his face, he joins in on the fun, pretending to be a monster. But when Evan returns to the bedroom, Karen's mood has shifted. She gently declines continuing their private moment, pointing out that the kids are still awake, but reassures him with a promise to resume their time together later. The next morning, they had breakfast with their father. Meanwhile, their friend Louis came home to work. Louis reassures Karen that he'll take care of the sculpture while she's away. Karen and the children, Jake and Lisa, leave for a beach vacation, excited for some relaxation. Before leaving, Karen reminds Evan about his physical therapy appointment, which he tries to skip, but she insists it's necessary. The children wish Evan could join them, but he stays committed to his work. As evening sets in, the weather turns rainy, and Evan becomes absorbed in his work, listening to loud music to keep himself company. After a brief video call with Karen, he's interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. Surprised, he opens it to find two women standing outside, asking for someone by a name he doesn't recognize. Though confused, Evan listens as they insist they're lost. After a back-and-forth conversation, he eventually invites them inside, offering his device so they can contact whoever they need, trying to assist them in their seemingly unfortunate situation. Afterward, Evan hands them towels to dry off and gives them his tablet to reach out to their friend. As they begin to settle in, one of the girls, Genesis, admits that they've come to the wrong address. They then start acting as if they don't want to impose further or cause any trouble. Sensing the situation, Evan suggests calling them an Uber, explaining that it's the most reliable way to get them where they need to go. When they learn that the Uber will take 45 minutes to arrive, the women ask if they can use the dryer for their wet clothes. Evan, wanting to be helpful, agrees and even offers to take a look at Genesis's phone, which had gotten wet. He mentions a trick he knows, placing the phone in rice to dry it out. The women thank him, and the atmosphere between them and Evan becomes more relaxed and friendly. He hands them robes to wear while he puts their clothes in the dryer, the interaction now more casual and comfortable. Evan and the girls engage in conversation, with Evan sharing that he used to work as a DJ in the past. The women seem to be flirting with him. Their interest is apparent as they ask about his age. When he responds that he's 43, they express surprise, complimenting him on how much younger he looks. The conversation shifts to his marriage, and they praise his wife, calling her beautiful. Curious, they ask where she is, and Evan explains that she's on a beach vacation with the kids, taking advantage of Father's Day. Suddenly, the women rise from their seats and begin touching him, catching Evan off guard. He feels awkward and uneasy, as this was far from what he expected.
It's fine, we celebrated this morning.
The girls' intentions become clearer as they start discussing intimate topics typically reserved for close relationships, trying to draw Evan in with their provocative conversation. Evan, clearly uncomfortable and not thinking along those lines, attempts to steer the conversation in a different direction. He starts talking about his talent as an architect, but the girls continue to push boundaries, finding ways to maintain physical contact with him. In an effort to diffuse the situation further, Evan mentions his proficiency in Spanish and tries to engage Bel in a light conversation in the language. He proudly shares that his children are also fluent in Spanish and then shifts the focus to his wife, mentioning that she's an artist with her own gallery in LA. Despite his efforts to redirect the conversation, the girls persist in their attempts to keep things flirtatious. Evan becomes increasingly uneasy as he realizes he's lost track of time and misses the arrival of the Uber. They begin challenging his beliefs, with Genesis telling him that being monogamous is unnatural and that it's in our DNA to explore different experiences. Bel adds that she understands her husband's desire for other women, so she chooses to be with other men to keep her relationship intact, shocking Evan with her candidness.
20 minutes away.
Caught off guard, Evan tries once again to change the subject, asking them about their professions. They casually mention that they're flight attendants, but before he can steer the conversation further, they close in on him again, making physical touches. Evan quickly shifts his position to create some distance between them. As the tension in the room builds, Genesis asks Evan for directions to the bathroom. He points her in the right direction, leaving him alone with Bel in the living room. Trying to ease the awkwardness, Evan decides to put on some music, but Bel seizes the opportunity, showing interest in his record collection and asking him to play one. As the music fills the room, she begins to dance, her movements intended to draw Evan in. Despite his initial hesitation, he finds himself caught up in the moment and makes physical contact with Bel. Just then, a notification pops up on his phone, alerting him that the Uber has finally arrived. This breaks the spell, and Bel quickly excuses herself to call for Genesis from the bathroom. He retrieves the women's clothes from the dryer and heads to the bathroom to hand them over. After knocking and receiving no response, he hesitates but ultimately decides to enter. To his shock, he finds the women undressed, and before he can react, they overpower his feelings and seduce him. Despite his initial reluctance, the situation spirals out of his control, and the Uber driver, having received no response, leaves. In the end, the women succeed in breaking down Evan's feelings, and they sleep with him, which is the night he never intended.
Guys, I have your clothes. They're pretty much dry.
The next morning, Evan is overwhelmed with regret. He finds the women eating messily in the kitchen, and when he asks where they live so he can drive them home, Genesis casually mentions she hasn't been home for 4 years. They laugh and tell him they plan to stay, further frustrating Evan. During a video call from Karen, who shares that Jake was stung by a fish, Evan struggles to focus as the girls distract him. Sensing something off, Karen ends the call, leaving Evan in deeper turmoil. Evan, fed up with the problem the girls have brought into his life, suddenly snaps and angrily orders them to change their clothes so he can drive them wherever they want to go. However, the girls remain calm and begin mocking him, taunting him by saying they want the real Evan, the one who let them in the previous night when it was raining. Bel starts playing hide and seek, but Evan is furious, blaming them for making him betray his wife. He finds Bel hiding in the closet, and though she tries to seduce him again, Evan, now filled with anger and regret, forcefully drags her to the other room. He sternly commands both of them to change their clothes within 3 minutes and tells them he'll be waiting outside, clearly intent on ending this nightmare. When Evan gets back, he finds the girl writing in the sculpture his wife had created. Furious, he considers calling the police, but they quickly stop him, with Bel claiming she's only 15 years old, threatening that he'd be arrested for what happened. To make matters worse, she shows him evidence, further trapping him. Desperate, Evan asks if they want money, but they refuse. As the tension escalates, there's a knock at the door. 𝐕𝐢𝐝, Evan's physical therapist, has arrived. Evan, panicked, warns the girls to stay where they are and tries to dismiss 𝐕𝐢𝐝 by saying he's fine. But in the middle of their conversation, Genesis appears, pretending to be waiting for him. 𝐕𝐢𝐝, realizing what's going on, leaves in anger, convinced that Evan has cheated on his wife.
Evan, it's Vivian!
Evan momentarily loses control and begins to suffocate Genesis, but he quickly stops, unable to go through with it. Desperate, he attempts to call the police, no longer caring about the consequences. However, Genesis swiftly intervenes, hanging up the phone and suggesting that he can make it all go away by simply giving them a ride. Eventually, Evan agrees and drives them to an unknown location, hoping to end the nightmare. Meanwhile, Evan spends the day cleaning up the material stuff, trying to restore its previous sense. As evening falls and he resumes his work, a sudden noise grabs his attention. He rushes to the living room and discovers a family picture shattered on the ground. Before he can react, Genesis unexpectedly strikes him from behind, catching him off guard. When Evan regains consciousness, he finds himself tied to the bed, helpless to do anything. Genesis is calmly applying makeup, using his wife's products, and completely ignoring his desperate pleas. As if things couldn't get worse, Bel enters the room wearing his daughter's clothes, mocking him by pretending to be his daughter. The situation escalates when Karen, his wife, calls via video. As Bel is about to answer the call, Evan, in a panic, offers to do whatever she wants. Seizing the opportunity, Bel forces herself on him, while Genesis records the entire encounter on his phone, further trapping Evan in their twisted game. Afterward, Evan manages to untie one of his hands. He immediately slaps Bel to the ground and rushes to confront Genesis. He begins to suffocate her, but she quickly grabs a fork and stabs him in his previous injury, causing him to lose control and collapse, weakened by the pain. While Genesis and Bel are torturing Evan, there's an unexpected knock at the door. It's Louis. Realizing who it is, the girls quickly text him from Evan's phone, pretending to be his nieces. Louis enters and is immediately shocked by the sight of the sculpture, now broken and defaced. Horrified, he threatens to call the police, but Genesis tries to attract him. Instead of being charmed, Louis becomes mad. As Louis confronts the girls, he hears a noise and finds Evan tied up. Despite Evan's pleas, Louis checks the sculpture first. When he returns, the girls are destroying it. Panicked, Louis tries to stop them but struggles to breathe. Searching for his inhaler, the girls cruelly toss it between them, and Louis, desperate for air, trips over a rock and dies. The girls then frame Evan for Louis's death, sending a text from Evan's phone to make it appear he's responsible. They return to taunt Evan, deciding he must die. Despite his pleas, they remain cold and determined. Evan, still tied up, tries to reach Karen using a tablet, but Genesis destroys it and mocks him. The girls then wreck his house and cut his hair. During the chaos, they find a gun in a vase. Genesis orders Bel to untie Evan, but warns him not to run, threatening to shoot. In a panic, Evan grabs a knife but trips while escaping, losing the knife and leaving himself defenseless. The movie concludes with Genesis and Bel wrapping Evan and dragging him to the grave they have dug. They start burying him, leaving only his face exposed. Evan pleads for mercy, but they coldly refuse. Genesis then mockingly places a tombstone near his head, calling it a game, and reveals that they target married men like him. After posting a video of what Bel forcefully did to Evan on Facebook, they leave him buried. Later, Karen arrives home, only to find their house in ruins, unaware of the horror that has transpired. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.